Hi, and welcome to the third week of the series called Mine. In this series, we've been talking about what does it mean to lay claim of our faith. We've learned things in Sunday school, we learned things from our pastors and our parents, camps and mission trips, but now it's time to decide, am I going to follow Jesus? Making the decision for ourselves. And this is where we read their series called Mine. So thank you for those who have been watching. If you haven't seen any of these videos, they're all on our website, weeks 1 and 2. And I encourage you to check those out if you haven't seen them. So here in week 3, we're going to be talking about how Jesus works even in times of struggle. So I just want to open us up a little bit about myself. So I went to Malone University, that's where I graduated college. And had 4 wonderful years there, met my soon-to-be wife there. But my first job out of college was not what I expected. I started working in this powder coating plant, and right just about in the middle of summer. So if you don't know anything about powder coating, which I'm sure you don't because I didn't, but powder coating is taking a metal, like a plain metal, and you spray this powder on the metal, and then the metal goes through this hot oven and gets heated up, and this powder becomes like a paint, and it covers the parts. So that was my job. I was the person who was taking the parts off the line, off this big line that went through the whole factory. And I'm standing right there by the oven. This was my first job out of college. This was my first full-time job. I had jobs before this, but this was my first full-time job. And it was quite an eye-opening experience. It shaped me in ways I never thought I would be shaped. And this story of this struggle that I went through, a real struggle, and I've perhaps shared this story with some of you before, that I did not expect this coming out of college. This was not what I thought I would be doing. So in today's, we're going to be learning about how God works in the midst of our struggles. So if you have a Bible with you, I would encourage you to go to Matthew chapter 14, and we're going to be reading verses 25 through 33. Matthew 14, 25 through 33. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, and to them is the disciples, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. Cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they had climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, I really love this passage. It's a passage of you see the disciples just kind of their minds kind of turning and understanding, who is this Jesus? All right, so a little bit of context. Jesus sent the disciples off in their boat, and he stayed on land to pray. So the disciples are on the boat, and the wind's starting to go, and the water splashing against the boat. And the disciples see Jesus walking on the water, and they think it's a ghost. You would think it's a ghost. If you saw someone walking on the water in the midst of a storm, we're all freaking out at that point. But they thought it was a ghost, and then Jesus speaks to him and is like, "Take courage, it is I," right? And then Peter says, "If it's you, call me." And Jesus calls him. And then Peter walks on the water, which Jesus walked on the water and Peter walked on the water. And then Peter begins to sink. So this is an amazing story of the disciples understanding and grasping Jesus. But there's a few things that I want to point out in how this story, what this story means for us and how we can grow our faith in the midst of struggles. So first thing I want to say is Jesus calls us in the midst of the storm. Jesus calls us in the midst of the storm. So Jesus is walking out on the water. There's the winds, there's the waves. They think they see a ghost. And then Peter says, if that is you, call me. And Jesus said, come. So in this moment, in this storm, credit to Peter to go out and listen, to follow Jesus. But Jesus called him. Jesus didn't say, Peter, stay in the boat. Stay in the boat. I'm going to walk towards you. Jesus said, come. Come. You see this? And sometimes we're in the midst of the struggle of our lives. Right now we're in this terrible virus. And we're also experiencing all this unrest and protest. We're living in quite an age right now. And Jesus may be calling us into something, into a struggle that we would not thought he'd be calling us into. All of us are facing struggles right now. All of us are facing tough times. But we can't see tough times and struggles as meaning that God is not involved or God doesn't care. And it's hard for us to wrap our minds around that God would call us out into the struggle. He would call us out into the storm, or if we're in the storm, Jesus speaks to us in the storm without just completely stopping it. So what this means is that in the midst of your struggle, and this is weird to say, in the midst of your struggle, in the midst of your storms, don't waste them. Don't waste the storm. Don't waste the struggle. And I know that's really weird. I mean, don't waste it. I can't wait till it's over. But a lot of times in the midst of those struggles and the pain and the pressure, we come out the other end better for it and completely change. And I say this not to minimize anyone's struggle or pain or pressure. But what I am saying is that make sure you're listening to the call of Jesus. And sometimes God allows these things into our lives to grow us. Second thing I want to say about steps of how to grow in our faith in the midst of the struggle is don't take your eyes off Jesus, the turning point. So when Peter goes out on the water, he's walking on the water, right? He's walking. And then what happens? He takes his eyes off Jesus and he begins to sink. And it's at this moment Peter realizes what's going on, right? He sees the winds, he sees the waves, and he's losing faith. And he begins to sink to the ground. And this is quite dramatic for me because, fun fact, I don't know how to swim. So I could just imagine Peter he's walking and then he's sinking. Right? He took his eyes off Jesus. So for us, it's just like Peter, we can't take our eyes off Jesus. You know, there comes a point in our struggle that we reach a turning point where we say, am I going to follow Jesus? Am I going to look at the storms? Am I going to follow Jesus? Or am I going to pay attention to the wind and the waves? Right? There's a turning point there. And Peter took his eyes off of Jesus. You know, his faith was in Jesus and believing that Jesus was there. And then the storms come and his faith is rattled and he begins to sink. So in the midst of our struggle, our tension, or the pressure, when we're in the midst of suffering, we got to say, look, I'm going to fix my eyes on Jesus. And you might be surprised that you may be able to walk on water. You see, when we fix our eyes on Jesus, we may be able to do things we never could have imagined. We could be walking on water in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the struggle. And then the last thing I want to point out, how we grow in the midst of the struggle for our faith. How do we lay claim to our faith in the midst of the storm? Jesus says, or Jesus will always reach out for us. Jesus will always reach out for us. So, back to the story, you have Peter walking out on the water. There's storms, there's wind, there's waves. He's fixed on Jesus. He takes his eyes off of Jesus. He begins to sink. And what does he say? He calls out for Jesus, and Jesus reaches. You can just imagine the hand of Jesus reaching into the water and pulling Peter up. And this is what happens in our own lives as well. When we're surrounded around the storms, the struggle, the heartache, and we think, Jesus, I am sinking. Some of you may be sinking right now. And I want you to know Jesus reach in his hand and pull you out. Are you looking for his hand? Are you calling out for him? Jesus, help me. You see, Jesus will reach out. He always reaches out. He does not let us drown. He does not let us drown. In the midst of the struggle and the tension, the heartache and the pain, the suffering, Jesus is there. And we don't have to look any further than the cross to see that our Savior, he suffered. He endured heartache and pain and punishment that was not meant for him. So we know we have a Savior that knows what it means to have hard times. And use this to something to stand on, knowing that, okay, I hear Jesus calling me in the storm. Or I hear Jesus calling me into a storm. There's a storm coming, and that's the voice of Jesus. And I'm confused and I don't understand. Jesus says, come. And what we do, we fix our eyes on Jesus. And we walk on the water. We believe in our faith in Jesus, that through Jesus we have the ability to walk on water. And when our faith shudders and when we shake and we see the winds and the waves and we begin to sink, it's at this moment we say, Jesus, help me. And we see the rushing hand of Jesus into the water, his nail-scarred hands pulling us out. And he says, I have you. And he does, and he says, you have little faith. What Jesus here, he's using this moment as a teaching lesson for the disciples. And he's saying, you must have faith in me. He's not belittling them. He's pointing out how little their faith was. And he's encouraging them, like, you need to have more faith. Trust me. Trust me. He's saying, trust me. You have little faith. Trust me. And then this passage ends with the disciples saying, who is this? Who is this? When the winds and the waves die down, they're like, who is this? And this is what we say at the end of our struggle, at the end of suffering. We might be saying, how did I get out of that? Who is this Jesus who brought me through? I pray that this video and this lesson and these lessons have been encouragement to your faith. And I cannot wait to see all of you again. Thank you.